Okay, so this is the key to the worksheet where we combine topics 29 and 30. And so you're given a graph and you're asked to find each of these. So let's talk about the domain first. So remember, the domain is a set of x coordinates. So you're going to go along the x-axis. Notice this is an open circle right here. So when you go along the x-axis, this is where you're going to start. So my x-coordinate here is -4. Since there's an open circle, it means that -4 is not going to be in the domain. So you need parentheses, -4, comma, and then the arrow. You keep on going, right? So when you talk about the domain set of x coordinates, you're going from -4 all the way to infinity because this arrow. All right, so that, and remember, infinity, negative infinity, you're always going to put parentheses with it. The range, you go along the y-axis, so the range is a set of y coordinates. So when I go along the y-axis, this is where I start. So that y coordinate here is -1. But remember, it's an open circle. So I need to put parentheses -1, comma, and then all the way to infinity. So when you talk about the y values, every point on this graph, my y value will be between -1 and infinity. Okay, the x-intercept, that's where the graph crosses the x-axis. So the x-intercept will be here. That's the x-axis. So my x-intercept, and they want you to write the x-intercepts as an ordered pair. So make sure you follow directions. So the x-intercept is -3. So you're going to say -3, comma, 0. Because remember, this point right here, that's the x-intercept. So my x-coordinate is -3, my y-coordinate is 0. The y-intercept, that's where the graph crosses the y-axis. So that's this point right here. So my y-intercept is going to be 0, 3. 0, 3. So make sure you put zeros in the right place. Remember, this is the x-coordinate, this is the y-coordinate. So my x-coordinate here is -3, my y-coordinate is 0. Here, my x-coordinate is 0, my y-coordinate is 3. Now, f of -2 means, remember, you got to make sure you understand what that means. F of -2 means what is the y value when x is -2. So you got to come right here and you got to find -2. So here's -2. So when you look at -2 right here, when x is -2, put a dot on the graph where x is -2. That's this right here. So if you look at this point now, this point right here has coordinates -2, comma, 1. So remember what this means. This means what is the y value when x is -2? So when x is -2, my y value is 1. So put a 1 there. Same thing here. When x is 1, so here's where x is 1, right? So put a dot on the graph where that corresponds. So that corresponds right here. So when x is 1, my y value is 4. So f of 1, what's the y value when x is 1? Well, my y value is 4. Okay? And then the next one, for what value of x is, remember, f of x means y, so think of it this way. So what value of x is y equal to 2? So here's where y is 2, right? So go along and you trace over it like this. So when y is 2, there's the point that corresponds to that right here. So that's that point right here. So when we label that point right here is -1, 2. -1, 2. So now we go here. When y is 2, what's that x value? When y is 2, what's that x value? That x value is -1. And that's how you do that. It's not difficult at all. It really isn't. Okay, now the next one, the domain. Remember, this is closed. This is an arrow. So domain and range should be easy for you now. So for the domain, you go along the x-axis. So when I go along the x-axis, I start touching the graph here. That's a closed circle. So that x-coordinate and that y-coordinate will be in the domain and range. So that x-coordinate, though, is -4. So you're going to say bracket -4 because of the closed circle. Remember, this one here was open, so that's why you saw parentheses here. And then all the way to, remember, this keeps on going, right? So all the way, so you're going from -4 all the way to positive infinity. The range, you go along the y-axis, so the arrow, so you're going along -infinity all the way to, and this is where it stops, so that's that y value you got to look at. That y value is 5. So negative infinity parentheses 5 with a bracket because of that closed circle. Okay, the x-intercept, we're going to have to estimate the x-intercept here. So let's estimate the x-intercept to be negative 1.5, right? It looks like it's in the middle. So we're going to say negative 1.5, comma, 0. The y-intercept, that's this right here. So the graph crosses the y-axis at negative 3, but make sure you label it as an ordered pair. So you're going to say 0, negative 3. All right, now let's talk about this. So remember, this means what is the y value when x is negative 2? So here's where x is negative 2, right? So on the graph, you put a dot where that corresponds. That corresponds right here. So let's label it. It helps if you label it. So that point is negative 2, comma 1. Negative 2, comma 1. So now this says, what's the y value when x is negative 2? Well, when x is negative 2, what's that y value? That y value is 1. Over here, what is the y value when x is negative 4? So here's where x is negative 4. So that's the point that corresponds to it. Let's go ahead and label it. So that's negative 4, comma 5, right? Negative 4, comma 5. So now we're going to answer the question. When x is negative 4, what's that y value? That y value is 5. Okay, now remember, f of x means y. So if y value of x is y equal to 3. So here's why y is 3 right here, right? So let's go ahead and put a dot where that corresponds on the graph. So that's right here, right here. So if I label that point, that's that point negative 3, 3. So that's negative 3, 3. Now we can answer the question. When y is 3, here's our y is 3, what is that x value? The x value is negative 3. Okay, so that's number 2. Let's look at number 3. So number 3, the domain and range. So remember, arrows on both sides. So you're going from negative infinity all the way to positive infinity. Okay, the range. Now be careful with the range. Remember, you have both arrows are pointing down. So you're going from, remember, it keeps pushing it down. So you're going from the y value of negative infinity all the way to, and then it stops here, and that y value is 4. So 4 with a bracket, negative infinity to 4 with a bracket. Okay, the x-intercept, there are 2 of them. So there are 2 places where the graph crosses the x-axis. Remember, you got to label them as an ordered pair. So that's the origin right here. So that's 0, 0. There's one of them. And the other one is 4, 0. 4, 0. The y-intercept, that's where the graph crosses the y-axis. There's only, whenever you're dealing with functions, there's always going to be, if you have arrows like this, you only have one y-intercept. So the y-intercept is the origin, so that's 0, 0. Okay, f of 2, just like we did before, what's the y value when x is 2? So here's where x is 2. Put a point on the graph where that corresponds. So that corresponds here, right? And then let's label that point. So that point is 2, 4. Now we can answer the question. When x is 2, what's that y value? When x is 2, what's that y value? That y value is 4. F of 3. So here's where f is 3, x is 3, right? So let's go ahead and label that. Put a point on that graph. And so the coordinates of that point here will be 3, 3, right? 3, 3. So now when x is 3, what's that y value? That y value is 3. Very simple, not difficult at all. Okay, number 4, you have arrows pointing up in this case. And so the domain, you're going to go from negative infinity all the way to positive infinity. The range, when you go along the y-axis, now remember this is where it starts right here. So that's that y value of negative 4 all the way to, it never stops, all the way to infinity. So from negative 4 all the way to infinity. Bracket negative 4, make sure it's a bracket. Okay, the x-intercept, where the graph crosses the x-axis. There are 2 places where the graph crosses the x-axis. This is 1, the x-intercept of 1, and this looks like negative 7. So you're going to say negative 7, 0, and then 1, 0. The y-intercept, there's only 1 place where the graph crosses the y-axis. That's right here. So that's at negative 1. So you're going to say 0, negative 1. Okay, f of 2. What is a y value when x is 2? So here's where x is 2, right here. Label that point right here. So x is 2, there's that point. So if I label it, that becomes 2, 1, right? 2, 1. And so now when x is 2, what's that y value? That y value is 1. F of negative 8, that's right here. So when x is negative 8, that's right here. Label that point. I'm sorry, that's negative 7, excuse me. So f of negative 8 is right here. So there's where negative 8 is. So that's going to be the point negative 8, comma 1, right? So when x is negative 8, what's that y value? The y value is 1. All right, and finally, notice you have an open and closed. There are no arrows. So since there's no arrows, you're not going to see any infinities in domain and range. So when I look at the domain, I'm going from left to right along the x-axis. So when I go from left to right, this is where I start. Remember, that's an open circle. So this negative 3, x negative 3 is not in the domain, so I've got to put that as parentheses. All the way, and then this is where it stops, and it stops when x is 3, which is in the domain because of the closed circle. So I'm going to put a bracket. The range, you go along the y-axis. So this is where I start, right here. That y value is negative 2. Negative 2 is in the range because of the closed circle. So I'm going to put a bracket. And then it stops here at 4, but 4 is not in the range because of the open circle. So I'm going to have to put parentheses. The x-intercept, where does this graph cross the x-axis? Crosses the x-axis here. So that's going to be 1, 0. The y-intercept, that's where the graph crosses the y-axis. So that's going to be 0, 1. So make sure you label those correctly. F of 2, what is the y-coordinate when x is 2? So here's where x is 2, right? Right here. So put a dot on the graph corresponding to that and label it. So that's 2, negative 1. 2, negative 1. So now we can answer the question. When x is 2, what's that y value? The y value is negative 1. F of negative 2, so here's where x is negative 2, right? So there's the point on the graph corresponding to that. See it right here. Label it. That's negative 2, 3. And now we can answer the question. When x is negative 2, what's that y value? The y value is 3. And then over here, just like in one of the other problems we did a while ago, this says f of x equal negative 2. You want to find for what value of x is y equal to negative 2. So y equal negative 2. So here's where y is negative 2. So you got to look at the y-axis now. Negative 2. There's the point that, see right here. There's the point that corresponds to it. So let's label this point. So that point is 3, negative 2. 3, negative 2. And so when y is negative 2, which is here, what's that x-coordinate? That x-coordinate is 3. And so that is the key to the worksheet on topic 29 and 30.